That's a clown question, bro.
Hi, what's up on you?
So I'm gonna kick some dirt.
He gets on base.
Just a bit outside.
I'm not the type of player that's going to be Johnny Hustle.
If you don't want me to watch the ball, you can go get it out of the ocean.
And welcome to the show to be named later, where we're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Kris Bryant. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing good. We're almost there. We're 128 days away from opening day of the 2021 season. It's getting closer and closer every day, but today we're going to start our series of Hall of Fame bubble cases, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah, this is the Hall of Fame bubble cases. They will be pretty big. We're doing them alphabetically, like whatever we think is a bubble case, which there are a considerable amount of bubble cases, some for different reasons. But yeah, we're going to be doing one a week, and it's going to be a pretty big part of the show. And
because this is the thing about this year's sorry to interrupt, but this year's Hall of Fame ballot, the thing is that there's no surefire Hall of Famers on this ballot. Like the most realistic scenario is that only one guy gets in from the BBWAA this year. And even that's not necessarily a flat out guarantee, but it's highly likely. So there are a lot of bubble cases, so to speak. There's guys that, we're wondering if they're going to stay on the ballot or not. There's guys that we're wondering, if they are going to make jumps this year, if they're going to make big improvements, if they're going to go down. So there's a lot to look at with a lot of guys, and we're going to start today.
Yeah, and I think this is the show, you want to hear about with the Hall of Fame bubble cases, because we'll go up and down and all around about why they might not be a Hall of Famer, why they might be a Hall of Famer. And today we'll be talking about Bobby Abreu, who did not get very much traction last year, still on the ballot, but we're going to get into that later. First, we'll talk about the news that's been going on in Major League Baseball with current players. This time, I think it was last Tuesday. I think it was the day after we recorded. Robinson Cano, current second baseman for the Mets, has always been an all-star second baseman, probably the best second baseman of this generation. But for the second time, he has been suspended for the use of performance-enhancing drugs, unfortunately. And he will be suspended for the entire 2021 season.
Yeah, so this is obviously a big news drop on, we said Tuesday, was it?
I think it was Tuesday.
We'll call it that. This is an interesting move for the Mets. I mean, you could argue that this could actually benefit them in the long run, and we'll get into that later. But we'll get into this for specifically Robinson Cano. I mean, he obviously lost a lot of credibility the first time he tested positive in Seattle. And when he got hurt, the Mariners actually played better without him, which was strange because he was having a pretty good year. And then he had an awful down year in 2019. Came back in 2020, did pretty well. And now it turns out that he tested positive again. I can't believe he did it a second time. Like, that's like the way that the testing works. Like, I'm really surprised that as a big name player that's already has a history of testing positive, that you're going to go out and do it again. And that's obviously what we're looking at here with Robinson Cano. This is a guy who once had a legitimate track for the Hall of Fame. That's not going to be happening now. I mean, if it happens once, there's a debate. If it happens twice, there's no way.
Yeah, and this is especially true now that there's regulations on performance-enhancing drugs. It's not like before 2005 when there was no punishment for performance-enhancing drugs, so it was basically legal. But now, yeah, it's against the rules. He's getting punished for it, and yeah, you have to look at his career through a different lens. I think that's kind of an obvious point to make, but you have to see it that way and his greatness. But yeah, I mean, for the Mets, I guess it's a bad thing, but I guess it does kind of segue into the into them possibly going after DJ LeMahieu, who's the best
Yeah.
second baseman on the market right now.
Not just that, but he's probably the best second baseman in baseball.
Yeah, I think probably going to be all MLB team back-to-back years.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for sure.
Getting into that, DJ LeMahieu has in fact stated that his priority or his preference is to play in New York. Now, obviously, of course, that means that there are two options. One of them would be, I mean, let's just call it like it is. The Yankees are the favorites to get him, and the Yankees, in the end, gun to my head, I would claim the Yankees are going to get DJ LeMahieu. I think that's kind of goes without saying. But what this does do, obviously, there's an opening at second base for the Mets. You know, Steve Cohen just came in, and the Mets have never been a bigger threat than right now with anybody, with any single person. I mean, can you think of the last big free agent they signed that wasn't like a re-signing?
Probably. I mean, I guess Carlos Beltran in the mid-2000s.
Exactly. That was a long time ago. I mean, obviously you had Cespedes, but that was the guy that you brought back. DJ LeMahieu is a guy you can bring in from just a couple blocks down the street. And this would be obviously very detrimental to the Yankees. But here's where the strategy can come in here. Obviously, the Yankees are going to be their number one priority is to get DJ LeMahieu back, and it should be. Like you've seen what a difference that guy makes in the lineup day in and day out, being a guy that sort of separates from that, three true outcome guy that a lot of those players are. Like, you can make that case for Stanton, Judge, Luke Voigt, plenty of those guys look like they're, three true outcome guys. And that's kind of what the Yankees were as a team, really, in the 2018 season. And DJ LeMahieu came in 2019 and sort of changed that culture around and, made the team better just with his presence alone. And that happened in 2020 as well. Of course, he ends up finishing third in the MVP voting. So he was obviously a big deal for this team. And the Yankees are going to want to pay him, and they should. However, LeMahieu is going to be 32 next year, 33.
Yeah, he's into his 30s. Yeah.
Yeah, he's going into his age. Oh, okay, his age 32 season. So you figure he's not going to get more than like 3 or 4 years on a deal. I mean, I'd be surprised if anyone, even the Yankees, were to give him essentially a lifetime contract. But if you're Steve Cohen, or if you're Ross Atkins or Mark Shapiro from the Blue Jays, or if you're any team that would consider LeMahieu, this is where you can give the Yankees a chance to drive up the price more and more and more. Because the more you pay LeMahieu, the less you're going to have for guys like Judge, guys like Urshela, guys like Torres, guys like Clint Frazier, guys like Gary Sanchez, that at some point they're going to need to re-sign. And you have to question the cap space they have, especially with all of the money that they just threw at Garrett Cole, all the money that they're throwing at Aroldis Chapman, and potentially the more and more money that they're giving to DJ LeMahieu because they're desperate enough to get him, and there's a lot of good motives for other teams. So therefore, that price gets driven up. And and mind you, the average annual value is probably going to be a lot because he's not going to get that many years.
Yeah, that is true. And yeah, I think it's pretty point blank that the Yankees are the favorites. And,
They should be.
If you're a Yankee fan, you want that to be done as soon as possible. We talked about it with his MVP case. He was the heartbeat of that whole lineup. You don't really know where your health is at with guys like Judge and Stanton. And, the only guy that's really been consistently in there producing at a high level is pretty much DJ LeMahieu, or at least at the highest, at as high a level as LeMahieu has. Urshela's done well, but not quite the same as LeMahieu. So yeah, you definitely want that. But yeah, the Mets being players is interesting, and you're right, definitely jacks up the price.
And, we've seen a lot of cases of hitters going to Citi Field and then kind of degressing because of the ballpark itself. DJ LeMahieu was a gap hitter. So, he hits the ball anywhere. And that's something that plays better in Citi Field than a lot of places. I mean, obviously, he spent his entire career in very, very hitter-friendly ballparks. He spent a lot of years at Coors, than he was at Yankee Stadium. Citi Field would probably be the most challenging home park for him, but if there's one guy that can conquer it, it's him.
Yeah. I guess that would be the case. He's not exactly a home run hitter. I mean, I think his numbers would go down, but it's not as big of a deal because on a scale, he'd still probably be the best producer in that lineup, even with like Pete Alonso in there.
Absolutely.
Just based on what we've seen from in the last couple of years and how he's been able to produce, that's not an unfair argument to make.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get like too far ahead of ourselves in projecting a Mets lineup with DJ LeMahieu because the reality is it's probably not going to happen. I'd give it like a 15% chance at best, because the Yankees are going to go all in on him, and they should, because ultimately, if you don't have DJ LeMahieu, your chances of winning the World Series in the immediate future, which is when they are trying to win a World Series, it goes down by quite a lot because of the presence that he adds into that lineup, both on offense, in fielding, base running. He's good at virtually everything, and the team isn't the same without him, especially if Judge and Stanton can't stay on the field.
Yeah. If like right now, I would still probably have in next year in 2021, I'd still probably have the Yankees as favorites to win the AL East. If they lose, I guess it's not losing because he's already a free agent, but if LeMahieu goes somewhere else, I don't know if they're the favorites in the AL East. Definitely not the clear favorites.
Their World Series chances are really the only thing that matters because that team is World Series or bust. And I know that doesn't go up if DJ LeMahieu isn't there.
That's definitely true. And I'm trying to think of like the American League teams that surpass them if LeMahieu goes.
I would say the White Sox if they had someone different managing, but we know that's...
I mean the Rays, maybe the Twins, but the Twins in the playoffs are a mess.
There could be some AL West team that surges.
Yeah, we'll see, but the Rays would definitely, in my mind, surpass them and make them. It would definitely create a harder path in the in the chase to get the World Series.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so I guess that kind of carries over into some rumors, I guess. It's all rumors at this point. It's before Thanksgiving. Nothing's really getting done outside of some minor deals.
Get ready for a lot of nothing's really happening at many points of this offseason. This is free agency is going to move very, very slowly. It's going to be like those years when Harper and Machado were free agents where they didn't sign until mid-February or even late February. I'm pretty sure Harper signed on March 1st. So, I mean, just get ready for that because with the deflated market after the COVID season, there's going to be a lot of confusion as to what people want to be paid versus what people are actually going to be paid. So just prepare for that.
Yeah, last offseason was a very good sign, but now that we have this big deal in terms of how teams were affected financially, it seems like it will be an off season more like going into 2018 and going into 2019.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple other things that you haven't mentioned here, but we'll start with Kris Bryant because that's kind of where things started. What are the rumors at with him right now?
There's interest. There's potential trade interest. The Red Sox have been mentioned and the Nationals have been mentioned. The Nationals have also been mentioned with DJ LeMahieu. And I think a move, I'll get into what the Nationals are doing because I did look up some stats, and a move from the Nationals, it would kind of make sense with like LeMahieu and
the biggest holes at third base
and Bryant. So yeah, and even if they, I guess it would be a far fetch, but they could, potentially move a guy to first base because their production from first base was bad. I'm looking at splits leaderboards, and I'm looking at combined OPS of teams' third baseman and first baseman, and the Nationals are the 5th worst in that category. They're ahead of the Diamondbacks, Brewers, Orioles, and the Rangers, who aren't exactly the best lineups. But yeah, they had a pretty good. Their lineup actually produced pretty well. They had an OPS plus above 100, which I didn't expect. But
It's because of Juan Soto.
Yeah, because a lot of it was because of Soto, and but Carter Keyboom was not producing at all at third base, and Eric Thames was a liability at first base. He had a 617 OPS, and
not only that, but Thames isn't going to be there next year. I mean, he's a free agent, and I can't imagine after a performance like that they'd bring him back.
Yeah, and if the Nationals want a second baseman too, I mean, they don't exactly have the best second base situation either. Although Luis Garcia, he's 20. He had a 668 OPS last year. I don't know if they're developing him or if they would want to potentially replace him with LeMahieu if they want to go there.
So, I mean, from a Cubs perspective, I think it'd be really interesting if Jed Hoyer came in and the first move he made was to trade Kris Bryant.
Yeah, that is true. I didn't think about that.
Because we haven't talked about this, but Theo Epstein resigned as the general manager of the Chicago Cubs. At this point, I believe him in saying that he wants to take a year off. He hasn't done that since he took over as the general manager of the Boston Red Sox in 2003.
Yeah, I think he took over in 2003.
I thought so.
Yeah, because Moneyball, because they were looking at Billy Beane after 2002.
Yep, you're right. So with that being said, Jed Hoyer, who's obviously been in the organization for a while, he was the assistant GM, I think, something like that. He's taking over now, and the Cubs are in such a weird spot where they could be rebuilding. It makes sense, but also they were, the division winners last year, and they could very easily contend next year. But I think it is time to move on. It's in some ways from this core. Because I think that a lot of guys, I think we've seen the best of Kris Bryant's career. I think we've seen the best of Anthony Rizzo's career. I'd say the same for Javier Baez even. I don't really see a lot of these guys getting any better as time goes on. So I think if there's a time to transition, you may as well get ahead of the game now.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think if you're talking about getting rid of those guys, then it seems like a full-scale rebuild is in action. I mean, I guess it would be a weird year to trade Bryant. Bryant's coming off of the worst year of his career. So I don't know how much they'll, I don't know what teams are going to be looking at. It is a 34 game sample size. So, that might not be as big of an issue for some teams. And, Kris Bryant has been one of the better third basemen in baseball overall, but we'll see how that kind of affects his trade value. But yeah, I mean, they did win the division last year.
Albeit a 60-game season. Do we think that could have changed in a 162-game setting? Do we think that maybe the Cincinnati Reds could have taken over? Maybe the Cardinals if they didn't have to play so many doubleheaders? I think those are the only two threats to that because I mean, the Pirates, I mean, we don't even have to talk about. And the Brewers, I don't see. I wouldn't have seen them catching fire at all.
Yeah, I would say if money really is an issue, I think Theo Epstein stated before, I think it was before the 2020 season, if money is an issue and you can't really add anybody on, I mean, I don't really see a championship caliber team when I see the Cubs. It seems like kind of a team that needs reinforcements. And if you can't have the reinforcements, then, it seems like a very in the middle team.
I mean, who on the Cubs team right now do you look at and say that's a guy who could, break out? That's a guy who could make improvements in 2021, other than maybe Ian Happ, but he was also the best player on the team. Who do you really see that as for the Cubs?
I mean, there's really not any. I mean, you had Yu Darvish had a great year last year, but it didn't end up really mattering that much.
You
Kyle
could shop
Hendricks is
Kyle
consistent,
Hendricks.
but he's not going to improve.
You could
Um,
shop Kyle Hendricks.
yeah, I mean,
Not saying that doesn't mean you have to trade him, but if you wanna throw him out there and say, hey, we got a a kind of a Greg Maddux type of guy, who probably would get. No, I wouldn't say he would get better with age, but I don't think he'd have that steep of a decline in this stage of his career.
oh yeah, I mean,
can-
Hendricks had an ERA below 3 this past year. He's consistently been in the low to mid threes in terms of ERA.
Yeah, I mean that would
So
be a great guy to have as your like 3 or 4, or even 2.
yeah, I mean, he's the Cubs too. I mean, I think he's a valuable 2
Mhm.
starter, and he's a 1 in some rotations.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like, yeah, there's not much future development here. I'm looking at ages, and on this baseball, on the Cubs lineup on Baseball Reference: Contreras 28, Rizzo 30, Kipnis 33, Baez 27, and he started young. He had a bad year last year. Bodie 27, Schwarber 27, Hap 25, and that's kind of the exception. Hayward 30, and Caratini 26. Not doesn't look great. And then the pitching staff is even older. Pitching staff, you really don't know what you're doing with the pitching staff outside of Darvish and Hendricks.
It's hard to move on from a core that won you a World Series, but I mean, you're 5 years removed from it now, or at least you're going to be next year. So it's pretty clear that most, if not all, of those guys aren't the same. Kris Bryant isn't his 2016 MVP self. Anthony Rizzo isn't the best offensive first baseman in baseball anymore. Javier Baez isn't. I mean, he's still an electrifying player in his own way, but he's not putting up the numbers that he used to, and he isn't as young as he used to be. I mean, I can go down the line here. Like, you can really state that for everyone there. So it hurts, but this is the time to move on from this core. And I think that trading Kris Bryant would be the ultimate statement as to, hey, we're doing this. Like, whether you like it or not, this is how we start our journey to the next one.
Yeah, and also like another case, like for this being kind of the end, and like, the one defense would be that they won the division last year. However, I think they had the worst record for a division winner in all of baseball, and
And they got swept in the playoffs.
Yeah, they got swept in the playoffs by the Marlins, who eventually would get swept by the Braves.
They scored
And
one.
they the Cubs started 13-3 last year, which you can't really depend on that. And for the rest of the year, they went 19-23. So you can't really rely on the fact that they're going to be one of the better NL Central teams for a whole 162 game season. And it, I kind of feared this probably prematurely when I put them as a 4th place team this year, but these are the things that came to my mind when I made that prediction.
Yeah, I mean, I also correctly predicted them to win the division as my sleeper team, but I don't think I had them getting past the any playoff series. I mean, I had
Yeah.
them lose the division series, but obviously I didn't realize that there would be a wild card series at that point. So, I mean, I think my prediction for the Cubs this year was kind of spot on, but I think you also have to recognize that it is time to move on. Like, it sucks, but it has to happen at some point, and it's better to do it, it is somewhat late, I guess, but at least doing it is going to help in the long run.
Yeah, probably. And then, of course, like with the Cubs, you can rebuild for a few years, and then when you have the pieces, you can also, go out in the free agent market. They're not a small market team, so it won't be.
By the
won't be
way,
as big.
how much are they looking back at that Jose Quintana trade and thinking, what were we thinking here?
Yeah, it's big. It is kind of similar to like the Red Sox post 2018, where there were some moves where they probably, I guess, shouldn't have made in pursuit of a second world championship. And I guess the Cubs kind of overreached there. But I mean, and yeah, and even at the time, it was very questionable, right?
Yeah. Oh, I remember I was in Cape Cod and I just read off, I think it was Heyman who was the first to report it, and I was just like, what? Like they traded Eloy and Cease for I mean, no disrespect to Jose Quintana, but I mean, he's never been the same. Like 2016 was his best season. That was 4 years ago. Like at this point of his career, he's like a 3 or 4 starter at best.
Yeah, because I mean, if you have Eloy and Cease there, I know we like to make fun of Cease, but I mean, he's probably a guy that will be good.
He's young. Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably a guy that will be
like
good.
When we make fun of Dylan Cease, it'll be just remember that Dylan Cease 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, Dylan Cease, like he will probably be actually good in the next couple years.
And by the way, when they got Quintana from the White Sox, at that point in the 2017 season, he had a 4.49 ERA with a 4.02 FIP over 104.1 innings pitched, and they traded 2 top prospects for that guy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild that happened. But yeah. What other things should we address? I guess Jay Happ is making rounds. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but he's getting
I
looks
wanted to talk about Blake Snell.
Yeah.
Because the Rays, I've conditioned myself to just never question the Rays at this point because they've made questionable moves so many times in the last 5 years or so, and it's worked every single time. So it's like, you know what? Go for it. If you want to trade Blake Snell, your former Cy Young pitcher who pitched really well for you in the postseason. Weird, but let's do it. Let's see what happens. Because I mean, you know that the Rays don't lose trades. I mean, when was the last time the Rays made a trade where you're like, well, that didn't go well? I guess maybe the Pham trade, but even Tommy Pham didn't even do that well this year.
Yeah.
But Hunter Renfroe was obviously DFA'd, and we'll see what happens with Xavier Edwards. But Blake Snell is probably the biggest name that they've put out on the trade market in the last, I guess, could you say since Archer? Or I would even put him above Archer.
Yeah, I would put him above Archer too.
That in recent memory, this is the biggest name they've put on the market.
Since Price, probably.
Since Price, yeah, let's say since Price.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the best one.
Yeah.
I mean, when they traded Price, they got what? Who'd they get in that deal?
They might have gotten, or no, that was the type.
Wasn't it a 3-team trade or something like that?
It was
because Austin Jackson went to Seattle in that trade.
We'll fact check here. David Price transactions. Here we go. David Price.
They got Willie Adames. That's like the only notable guy. I mean, they got Drew Smyly, Nick Franklin, and Willie Adames. Drew Smyly pitched for a couple of years, but now when they were good, Willie Adames was their starting shortstop in the World Series. So.
Yeah, and yeah, Adames had a very good year.
Mm-hmm.
Very good year this year. But yeah, since Price, and have there any? I haven't paid much attention to the Blake Snell news. Have there been any teams associated with?
Not necessarily. All of the reports have just said the Rays are open to listening to Blake Snell trades. The question that's going to come up is, does any of this have to do with that decision in Game 6? Like, is Snell upset with that? Does he want to seek, employment elsewhere? And I think that's something that if this move does happen, we'll probably get some more word of that going forward, because we know that Blake Snell isn't afraid of opening up and sharing how he really feels, especially in a very unprompted situation. I mean, and it goes beyond talking about the Pham trade when he first heard about it. Like, when he did those sound offs on Twitch about getting COVID, about like how, he was not about to risk his life playing in a pandemic when, the league wasn't going to offer them a prorated salary and stuff like that. So I'm sure if Blake Snell does get dealt, and he'll be on Twitch someday and someone will be like, what were you really thinking that night? Like, were you mad? Like, were you upset? Did you want out? And is that why the trade happened? I mean, do you want to talk about potential suitors?
I mean, the fun thing with pitchers is anyone can really be a suitor. You don't really have to have a whole.
I think the only teams I could safely rule out is anyone in the AL East. I don't think that they would trade their best pitcher within the division. I mean, I don't think they'd trade him to the Yankees. I don't think they'd trade them to the Red Sox. I don't think they'd trade him to the Blue Jays. And I don't think the Orioles would even be a contender. Maybe the Mariners, because he is a Seattle guy. And I feel like they could definitely use a veteran starter in that rotation because a lot of their starting pitching is young.
Yeah, and Snell also, by the way, he's not getting paid very much. It's like $10 million a year under his new contract that he signed after 2018. So no one's really out of the mix here. It's not just big market
He's
team.
affordable. Yeah, he's an eighth and affordable. So, I mean, any team who's looking for some starting pitching, some legit starting pitching, like Blake Snell is out there.
Yeah, what if the Angels get Snell and Bauer?
That would be nuts. I mean, who would they trade for? Who would they realistically be giving up? Like Brandon Marsh? I think that'd be the potential biggest name. Because how many years of control does Blake Snell?
He's got maybe four years of control left. 3 or 4.
Yeah, after 2023. So
3 more years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Blake Snell on the open market. So I guess if you got a prospect that you wanna give up for some starting pitching right now,
I think my gut would say Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle. Yeah, that seems like a.
Like they have a pool of prospects that they'd be willing to give up. That I mean, and a lot of their starting, I've said this earlier, but a lot of their starting pitchers, they definitely have potential, but there isn't much veteran leadership within that, and that's what Blake Snell can provide, and also, do a really good job with, both on the mound and off. I mean, I guess Marco Gonzalez would be the guy, but I mean, no one really looks at him and says like, and they should, but he's not a defined ace, but he should be. He should be looked at a lot more. I will say that.
Yeah, like maybe a wild card scenario is like the Padres. They just lost Clevenger for the year.
Can we hold on? Can we talk about that tweet, by the way? Because I think I said this to you, but like when the Padres tweeted it, like it was broken by the Padres Twitter account. It wasn't like, Jeff Passan or Ken Rosenthal like put out a tweet and then the Padres put it out. This was broken by the San Diego Padres Twitter account that said, "We've signed Mike Clevenger to a 2-year extension through 2022. Clevenger will also be getting Tommy John surgery on Tuesday." So
yeah.
It's like, hey, do you want the good news or the bad news first? The good news, okay, well, yeah. Mike Clevenger will be here for 2 more years. The bad news is he's actually not going to be here for one of the years.
Yeah, it's weird. It's also weird because he was already there through 2022 because of control, but they decided to not do arbitration and just sign just a 2-year deal through that year. And it seems like, and it's definitely not the case, but it seems like they did that only so they could fire off that tweet like that.
Yeah. They were like, well, that was one where they definitely muted notifications on Twitter.
Yeah, it was weird.
I'm not going to look at the replies at all.
And were they the first source saying that he was getting Tommy John surgery?
Yes.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the first people that said he was getting extended and the first people that said he was getting Tommy John surgery. So if you read that tweet like I did, that was my finding out. I was like I read it. I was like, oh, cool. Like the Padres, like that's a smart move for them. And I read the second part of the tweet. I was like, oh, wait a second. What? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
We needed to address that.
Yeah. And also, yeah, it stinks that they don't have that pitcher for the next year because he was one of the better pitchers in the AL for a couple of years.
On that to be able to replicate what he did last year. And I mean, Zach Davies, you've addressed plenty of times as being a high expected ERA type of guy with a low actual ERA. So that doesn't really seem sustainable.
Yep.
I mean, who else was in that rotation? Like Chris Paddock needs to be better. That goes without saying. He has not been what they had hoped he'd be at this point.
So
He showed last season.
They could possibly take a look at Snell. I don't know how many prospects they have left to give, but it's, I guess something to look at.
For sure.
But yeah, that's I guess that's the Blake Snell story. Some rumors. Going to be a lot of rumors, not a lot of action probably until we hit the new year, unfortunately. But hopefully we're wrong about that. But just based on what we've seen in the past couple weeks, it seems like not a lot going on. Is there anything else that comes up to mind in terms of MLB offseason news?
Nope.
All right, so now we're getting into one of our bubble cases, our first bubble case. We're doing it alphabetically. So we start off with the A's, Bobby Abreu. He's a guy, he got 5.5% of the vote last year, his first year.
Just
so,
fractions away from falling off the ballot.
Literally 0.6% away from falling off the ballot. And, I think he should be getting more consideration. I'm not saying that he is or isn't a Hall of Famer quite yet. But you got to take a look at his on the surface stats. So on the surface, he has a 60.2 B WAR and a 59.8 F WAR. Not much differentiation. 41.6 peak WAR, which they take the best 7 years in terms of wins above replacement. They add them up, and it basically kind of tells you, how dominant you were in your prime. And his peak WAR was 0.8 below the average Hall of Fame right fielder, which, that's the average Hall of Fame right fielder, not, the baseline. That's the average Hall of Fame right fielder. So that's a good sign for him. Abreu also, his quadruple slash line was 291, 395, 475, 870, with a 120 OPS plus and a 129 weighted runs created plus. Baseball Reference has him at 28% above the average hitter. Fangraphs has him at 29% above the average hitter. And he did all that in 10,081 plate appearances, which is a considerable amount. Not a lot of guys get to that point. He also had 2,470 hits, 1,476 walks, 288 home runs, 400 stolen bases, and 574 doubles. And in the playoffs, if you want to consider that, because I know, a lot of guys make a big Hall of Fame case like in the playoffs. He only had 79 plate appearances in the playoffs, and he had a 284 average and 810 OPS. So it doesn't really play that much of a factor. So what do you see based off of on the surface statistics with Bobby Abreu?
I mean, it's hard not to notice the home run production with the stolen base production.
Mm-hmm.
On the surface, Bobby Abreu was always a guy that just fell far, far, far under the radar. And that's continuing on the Hall of Fame ballot. So I'm glad that we're getting this opportunity to shine some light. I know a lot of people on baseball Twitter have been doing so. On the surface, the home runs, the walks especially. I just pulled up this list. There are 8 players in Major League history to have 200 doubles, 400 stolen bases, and 500 doubles. They are Barry Bonds, Ricky Henderson, Craig Biggio, Bobby Abreu, Johnny Damon, Paul Molitor, Jimmy Rollins, and Roberto Alomar. So that's a pretty decent list. Most of those guys are Hall of Famers, or Barry Bonds, which, we know why he's not in the Hall of Fame, and it's not because of his numbers.
200 home runs, 400 stolen bases, 500 doubles. Mm-hmm. Very good combination.
Yeah.
So yeah, on the surface, very, 60 Baseball Reference WAR, 2,400 hits, 1,400 walks, pretty big deal. And yeah, 288 home runs, 400 stolen bases, pretty big deal. So I guess, other things, he was a 290 lifetime hitter, had a 395 lifetime on base percentage, which is very, very good. But also, I guess what should be considered is he played in possibly the most offensive era ever. But also, a lot of that was due to performance enhancing drug use coming up.
He was not an alleged user, is he?
I looked it up. I don't think he is.
Okay.
I don't think there's any allegations against him. I think he just kind of flies under the radar. So some comparisons that I have, very specific comparisons. Maybe, you could debate how accurate it is, how, the context of it all. So he has 60.2 B WAR in 10,000 plate appearances. So I took a look at all the players who had between 58 and 62 B WAR in 9,000 to 11,000 plate appearances. So there's Todd Helton, who's on the ballot, Jack Beckley, who is a dead ball era Hall of Famer, Willie Davis, who did not make the ballot, but he had a career 723 OPS. So a lot of the guys, if you have a spectacular defensive career, but not a very good offensive career, you just won't get that attention. Bobby Abreu is not one of those guys. Gary Sheffield is another guy between 58 and 62 B WAR in 9,000 to 11,000 plate appearances. He's on the ballot and would likely be a Hall of Famer already, if not for alleged steroid use. There's also Harmon Killebrew, who's a Hall of Famer. Obviously, he had 573 home runs. Zach Wheat, who is a Hall of Famer. Ichiro Suzuki, who will be a Hall of Famer for sure. Vladimir Guerrero, who's a Hall of Famer. Darrell Evans, who is a first ballot drop. So I guess you can see the consistency here with the writers. Sammy Sosa, who would be a guaranteed Hall of Famer if not for steroids. And John Olerud, who was a first ballot drop, Hall of Very Good, and I would say fell off very quickly because of a lot of the reasons Abreu is not getting much traction now, because he played in an era of greatness where there were a lot of great hitters and his greatness didn't quite get recognized. So anything eye popping to you based off of this?
I mean, I see a lot of guys other than Abreu that should have gotten more consideration. The biggest one being Dwight Evans. John Olerud is someone who I highlighted as pretty much the definition of Hall of Very Good. I wish he wasn't a first ballot drop. I'm not saying he should be a Hall of Famer, but I do wish he got some more consideration. And obviously, there's a couple guys, currently on the ballot, Helton, Sheffield, Sosa, guys like that. So, I mean, I think this speaks a little bit more about the other guys and not so much Abreu, but it's certainly not bad company to be in.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we get a feel for it, and it tells you that, like, historically, like we haven't had wins above replacement this entire time. So, guys have mostly been looking at home runs, hits, how you looked on the field, a lot of that stuff. So now the last comparison thing I will do with the filters. So I have a list of players that had between a 125 and 130 OPS plus in 9,000 to 11,000 plate appearances. This is where we see a lot more Hall of Famers, players between 125 and 130 OPS plus, which means you're a very good hitter, I guess you would say, and between 9,000 and 11,000 plate appearances, of course. So you got Roberto Clemente, who's the headliner of that list. He's a Hall of Famer, of course. Ron Santo, he's a Hall of Famer. Robinson Cano, who would be a future, we mentioned him early in the episode, would be a future, probably a first ballot Hall of Famer, if not for the PED use. Dwight Evans, who dropped off after 3 ballots and was brought back in an alternate ballot, didn't quite make it, but there's a very good case that he should have made it.
Absolutely should.
Goose Goslin.
Not to be confused with Goose Gossage.
Yeah, this guy played in the 20s. He was a Hall of Famer. Jack Beckley, who we mentioned before, dead ball era Hall of Famer. Zach Wheat, Hall of Famer. Sammy Sosa, guaranteed Hall of Famer if not for steroids. John Olerud, who we went over before. Willie Keeler, who's a dead ball era Hall of Famer. George Sisler, who's a Hall of Famer. Bernie Williams, who was a second ballot drop off, and Jim Rice, who is a Hall of Famer. So a lot more Hall of Famers in that group. Players between a 125 and 130 OPS plus in 9,000 to 11,000 plate appearances. So yeah, I guess we kind of get into the case against and for Abreu.
I'll start with the case against him.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. I mean, this is definitely much more of an intriguing case that a lot of people, I think, would have thought. I remember my senior year of high school after the election where Mariano Rivera went in and all those guys. The day after the election, Brian Kenny started making the case on MLB Network for Bobby Abreu. And I was like, all right, Brian, like pump the brakes here. Like I get analytics of the future, but like Bobby Abreu, like come on. And some of the things I was thinking was that he never finished in the top 5 in position player B WAR, and he only finished in the top 10 5 times, which isn't that much if we're looking at a Hall of Fame standard here. He never finished in the top 5 in OPS or OPS plus, and he only finished in the top 10 in OPS twice, and in the top 10 in OPS plus 3 times. And he was also kind of a liability on defense, negative 10.9 defensive WAR, and negative 141.3 defensive runs above average. So obviously, and he didn't make that big of a name for himself. He was never very marketable as a player. Like when he retired in 2014, it sort of went by the wayside, especially because Derek Jeter also retired that year. So that certainly didn't help. But regardless of that, I really didn't think much of Bobby Abreu. But then I learned about the case for him, and it is very interesting.
Yeah. And, I think, we have a lot more notes on the case for him, not necessarily saying that there is a better case for him, but the case against him, I think the numbers mean a lot more, never being in the top 5 in B WAR, never being in the top 5 in OPS. That's a pretty big deal. However, I think what he was able to produce throughout the entire career and, how he kind of compared in his prime also, it wasn't very bad when you consider also what he was able to do throughout his career. So he was top 5 in FWAR from 1998 to 2004. So in that 7-year stretch, he was a top 5 player in all of baseball among position players. And also from 1998 to 2009, 12 seasons, there were only 4 players in baseball with 12 800 plus OPS seasons. Those 4 players were Alex Rodriguez, who definitely would be a Hall of Famer if not for steroids. Manny Ramirez, same thing as A-Rod. Chipper Jones, who was a first ballot Hall of Famer, and
With
Bobby
97%
Abreu.
of the vote. Yeah. And Bobby Abreu. I kind of cut that off, my bad.
Yeah, there's Bobby Abreu right in there. And also Bobby Abreu had 5 seasons with a 900 plus OPS and 25 plus stolen bases. 5 seasons, that's a good amount of seasons having such numbers. And those are tied for the second most such seasons in the live ball era. He's behind Barry Bonds and he's tied with Willie Mays. Not saying necessarily that he's as good as those 2 guys, which he definitely isn't, but in terms of offense production from the batter's box and production on the bases, there is certain ways you can compare him to guys like that. Not a lot of guys were able to do it like Abreu did. And also, we're going to look at some pretty standard stats, nothing too complex about it. There are 20 players with 2,400 plus hits, 1,400 plus walks. 20 players with those numbers, 2,400 plus hits and 1,400 plus walks. Bobby Abreu had 2,470 in terms of hits, 1,476 in terms of walks. 17 of those 20 other players, are Hall of Famers, and the other 3 are Barry Bonds, who isn't in because of PED use, which that's what the writers view it on, and Pete Rose, who is banned from baseball.
Needs no introduction.
And Gary Sheffield, who we went over, would be a Hall of Famer already if not for steroid use, because 509 home runs and other things of that nature. But 20 other players, 17 are Hall of Famers, and the 3 others would be Hall of Famers if not for other things. That,
and
of course,
Bobby Abreu.
Yeah, and then there's Bobby Abreu with the 2,400 plus hits and 1,400 plus walks. So, not saying he's necessarily as good as everyone on that list, but these are things to consider when you, of course, for all the BBWA writers listening to this. And there are 4 other players in baseball history. I think it's the live ball era. I forgot to write. There are 4 other players, I think, in the live ball era with 2,400 plus hits, 1,400 plus walks, and 400 plus stolen bases. Or actually, no, it's in baseball history. But in baseball history, there's only 4 other players with 2,400 plus hits, 1,400 plus walks, and 400 plus stolen bases. Those guys are Joe Morgan, Ricky Henderson, Eddie Collins, and Barry Bonds. Obviously, only Bonds out of those 4 guys is not a Hall of Famer. And then if you want to say that, these filters are kind of
cherry picking,
nitpicky because Bobby Abreu, he barely got over those measures. If you drop those filters down to 2,300 plus hits, 1,300 plus walks, and 300 plus stolen bases, the only guys you're adding are Hall of Fame caliber, or guys with Hall of Fame caliber numbers. Tim Raines, who is a Hall of Famer, Alex Rodriguez definitely would be a Hall of Famer, or a future Hall of Famer if not for his history. Tris Speaker, Hall of Famer, and obviously Willie Mays is a Hall of Famer. Also, there's one other man in the live ball era with an 850 plus career OPS and 350 plus career stolen bases. That man is Barry Bonds, and definitely would be a Hall of Famer if not for his past. And there's plenty of other stuff to go over here. There's only 5 other men in the live ball era with 350 plus stolen bases and an OPS plus of 125 or better. Those 5 men are Rod Carew, Joe Morgan, Ricky Henderson, Barry Bonds, and Bobby Bonds. And Bobby Bonds is not in the Hall of Fame. However, Bobby Bonds had over 1,900 less plate appearances than Bobby Abreu did. He also had less wins above replacement and lower numbers in all slash line categories. So Abreu has the advantage there. There are also 21 other players. And what we have to mention is, Bobby Abreu, 395 career on base percentage is a big deal. Big deal. 395 on base percentage is a huge deal. And there are 21 other players in baseball history with a 390 plus career on base percentage in 10,000 plus plate appearances like Bobby Abreu had. 18 of those 21 are Hall of Famers, and the other 3 are Barry Bonds, Miguel Cabrera, who's currently in Major League Baseball, and Gary Sheffield. And I think the ultimate case with Bobby Abreu is, personally, in my opinion, I think he was kind of overshadowed by all the stars that played during his era. I mean, you think, the 1998 to 2004 when he peaked, there were a lot of other stars around.
Mm-hmm.
Barry Bonds, the most notable, and then more Hall of Fame caliber guys like, Andrew Jones, Todd Helton. And, a little bit before Abreu, there was Ken Griffey Jr., who kind of fell off when Abreu was starting to peak. And despite Abreu not finishing top 5 in a lot of these categories, it seems a lot of it was because there were so many great players. And if Abreu was playing in today's game, he probably would have been top 5 a lot of the times, and he'd probably be regarded to as one of the best players in the game. He'd be a top 10 player in the game for sure. And to prove that point that I'm making, a statistical analysis on kind of the eras, the 10-year period of 1995 to 2004 had 8 players with 50 plus F4. 8 players had 50 plus F4 between 95 and 2004. And the 10-year period before that, 85 to 94, had 4 such players, half as many players with 50 plus F4. And the 10-year period after 95 to 04, 05 to 2014 only had 3 such players. So Abreu probably would have been looked at differently had he played in a different era. And a lot of it was because guys were on performance enhancing drugs. And if you're someone that puts performance enhancing drugs against a certain player in the era that Abreu was playing in, then I think you should be a big Bobby Abreu fan, because I don't think he's ever been accused with steroids, and if he has, it's only been kind of rumors, nothing really confirmed. So you have that. And one last stat we have for Bobby Abreu is Abreu and Bobby Bonds are the only players in Major League Baseball with 200 plus homers, 400 plus stolen bases, and an 850 plus OPS. So, Abreu, I think, definitely should be getting more consideration. I can't really tell you right now whether I will be putting him on the ballot or not. What are your thoughts on it?
As of right now, I do hope that he gets more consideration. I do want him to stay on the ballot because he is certainly someone I would absolutely vote for in a given year. I just don't know if I'm ready to do it this year. I think I have 9 spots made up in my mind, and Abreu is one of the guys fighting for that 10th spot. So I certainly would love to see him stay on the ballot because, like I just mentioned, I definitely will vote for him at some point, assuming he stays on. I just am not quite sure if I'm ready this year, but I could be. And if I vote for him, I definitely would be confident in it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like if he's in a different era, and that's the weird thing with the Hall of Fame is you're only allowed to have 10 guys on a ballot, but especially like when we're doing an era where most of these guys played in, the mid 90s to early 2000s, there were a lot of great players during that time. So fitting 10 on one ballot might be a challenge, and, Abreu might, be getting left off because of that reason. So kind of puts people in a bit of a complex.
I think he would be getting a lot more consideration if he, was on some better teams. And I know that's not really much of his control, but he came to a lot of teams before and or after they were good. Like he left the Phillies, I believe after 05, they later won in 08. He left the Yankees after 08, they later won in 09. He joined the Angels. I mean, it was a lot later, but he joined the Angels after they won. Like he was on a lot of teams that, went to the playoffs but didn't get very far. They're just flat out didn't go to the playoffs. He finished his career with the Mets in 2014 before they were, the year before they went to the World Series. So a lot of the teams he was on was sort of bad timing with how good they were. And I think that's a lot of the reason why he gets overshadowed. But if you're, I mean, I can't imagine there's any baseball writers listening to this, but if you are, please give Bobby Abreu some consideration at the very least, because he deserves it.
Yeah, because I think immediately when someone mentions Bobby Abreu and Hall of Fame, everyone just kind of rolls their eyes at it.
Yeah,
but
like, can you picture? I mean, I think it's a lot of it's like, imagine walking through Cooperstown. You see, Babe Ruth. You see Stan Musial. You see Joe Morgan, and you see Bobby Abreu. It does look a little weird, but I think the eye test is stupid in a lot of scenarios, and I think that there is a legitimate case to be made for Bobby Abreu.
Yeah, I mean, if you just kind of put the numbers in front of somebody and didn't attach a face to.
I was gonna say if you did like a player A and player B type of thing.
Yeah, and it's hard to compare him to a lot of guys. I think Bobby Bonds is actually a very good comparison, although Abreu did produce almost like 4 seasons worth more of plate appearances, so he gets the nod in terms of that. And I'm trying to think like who else would compare it to, because he's like his ability to produce at the plate and on the bases, it wasn't really seen that much, especially in his era. It was like there was a lot of power hitting in his era, but there wasn't a lot of like guys who also were able to steal bases.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like because when he was getting good, Bonds had sort of stopped with his base running ability and became only known for his hitting. So there wasn't a lot of guys doing what he did. And like if he had the 128 OPS plus but didn't have the 400 stolen bases and had more like 100 stolen bases, I'm probably not considering him at all. But because he had that ability to steal bases and make a difference on the bases, I think there's a big consideration. And got on base almost 40% of the time, 395 on base percentage in 10,000 plate appearances. Pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's our that's the bubble case for Bobby Abreu. We both really can't tell you where our thoughts are on him, except for what we just told you.
Yeah.
So anything more on what's going on around baseball? Or I guess we should. Who are we talking about next?
Jimmy Fox. Oh, are we talking about I'm Mark Burley, right?
Yeah, I mean the Barry Bonds thing is.
I feel like we should. I mean, I can't just do like.
Yeah, we'll save like.
We'll skip that because I mean, and we can. I feel like we should do Bonds and Clemens in one thing because we know why they're not in the Hall of Fame. It's not because of their numbers.
Yeah.
I think Mark Burley should be our next one.
Yeah, Mark Burley.
I do think there is a legitimate case to be made for Mark Burley. I've kind of been addressing that a lot, and I'm looking forward to that next week.
Yeah. Well, Mark Burley kind of had an under the radar career. But yeah. So that leads to the conclusion of the show. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, want to watch us talk, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's called STBNL with Kris Bryant and Daniel Curran. And if you want to follow us on social media, follow me on Twitter at Kris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran. And follow the show Instagram at STBNL Podcast. Get to know when, because a lot of the social media is telling you when we're posting these episodes. So make sure to check that out. And we hope you enjoyed our MLB news coverage / bubble case of the week. And we hope to be seeing you on Thursday when we're going to be talking about Jimmy Fox, and on Friday where we're going to be talking about the 1989 Oakland Athletics. So see you then.